Sloan and the MIT Leadership Center, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the second event in the spring term of the Dean's Innovative Leader Series. We are truly delighted to have as our guest today Bob McDonald, Chief Operating Officer of the Procter & Gamble Company, the #1 maker of household products. It's likely that most of you, if not, let's start all over. It's likely that most of you have used at least one, if not many, of P&G's products in the past 24 hours. In fact, you probably used some in the bathroom this morning. Crest, Gillette, Tide, Charmin, Olay, Swiffer, P&G is the maker of billion-dollar brands. P&G is also known for its innovative practices, like its decision to move from R&D to C&D, connect and develop. This new form of product development allows P&G access to a network of experts throughout the world, enabling them to borrow great ideas and leverage them. In our terms, there's a lot of distributed leadership going on. For example, when they needed to find a way to write on Pringles potato chips, they did not start a new development effort. Instead, they used their network of experts around the world in order to find a baker in Italy who knew how to write on cookies. They borrowed that technique, and in a very short period of time, they were able to write on Pringles. Despite the tremendous growth and change that P&G has experienced throughout the years as it has moved in this innovative direction and adjusted to changes in the environment, it has remained rooted in the principles of personal integrity, respect for the individual, and doing what's right for the long term while maintaining a strong financial position in the world. As of 2008, P&G is the 8th largest corporation in the world by market capitalization and 14th largest U.S. company by profit. The company has also been studied and recognized for its dedication and ability to develop the best leaders. P&G was one of Fortune's most admired companies and recently was selected as one of the Global 100 most sustainable corporations in the world for 2009. Bob is an exemplar of the great leadership at P&G. He has been described as an inspirational leader and is known for his ability to energize organizations and drive business results by taking a personal interest in the development and success of the people that he leads. He entered the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in 1971, finishing 13th in his class, which is quite extraordinary at that institution, and then went on to serve as an Army captain in the 82nd Airborne. While still serving in the Army, Bob received an MBA from the University of Utah in 1978. Bob joined Procter & Gamble in 1980 in the U.S. Marketing Division and successfully rose into executive positions. I won't go through all of them. They're outlined in the bio that you all have and that was passed out as you came into the room. However, he was appointed Vice Chairman of Global Operations in 2004 upon returning to the U.S. after 14 years abroad, including a long stint in Asia. Bob assumed his current role as Chief Operating Officer in July 2007. As COO, he oversees all global operations and corporate functions in more than 80 countries. In 2007, Bob's efforts were recognized with the inaugural Leadership Excellence Award from the Stockdale Center for Ethical Leadership at the U.S. Naval Academy and Harvard Business Review. The award recognizes top executives of U.S.-based companies who consistently exemplify a commitment to personal integrity, business success, and fellow employees. We are delighted to have Bob with us today to share his perspective and his passion for values-based leadership. Please join me in welcoming Bob McDonald.
Thank you, Deborah, for that very kind introduction. I wanted to talk about values-based leadership this afternoon, and really what I want to do is talk to you about a process. It's a process that's covered in a book that I helped create. It's a book called The Leader's Compass, and it's written by a fellow named Dennis Healy and another fellow named Ed Ruggiero. And basically the book lays out a process by which you as an individual, or I as an individual, get in touch with the way we've been acculturated. You know, the experiences we've had in life. Deborah told you about many of my experiences, having gone to West Point, having been in the Army, joining P&G, having lived in many countries around the world. And you try to understand how these different experiences have affected your belief system, and then what your beliefs are. And then those beliefs obviously inform your behaviors as a leader. Leadership is nothing more than observing a collective set of behaviors. People observe those behaviors and they say, well, that's leadership. But those behaviors come from somewhere. They come from a set of beliefs. And those beliefs are things you've developed throughout your life. So the process that's in this book, The Leader's Compass, and the one that we teach at Procter & Gamble is, why not spend the time to get in touch with all of these various things, your culture, experiences, education, what your family has trained you to do. Understand what your beliefs are. Actually write them down. Share them with the people that you love. Share them with the people you work with, because people in an organization like to work for a leader that's predictable. They like to work for a leader that they know what that leader expects, what's important to that leadership. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to role model for you over the next few minutes my leadership beliefs, the 10 leadership beliefs I have, the different experiences they've come from in my life, why I believe the way I do, not because I want you to share those 10 beliefs. I don't want you to do that. What I'm trying to do is role model for you a process to get in touch with your own beliefs, what you believe as a leader. Write it down. When you go to interview for a job at a company, talk to the interviewer about what you believe in, why you believe in that, and what kind of leadership you're going to bring to that company. If you asked any of us in business today, what's the scarcest resource we have? We wouldn't argue it's the buildings, it's not the employees, it's not the brands, it's not the technology, it's leadership. Leadership is the scarcest resource and the most important resource in the world. Nothing happens without leadership. So be deliberate about it. Spend some time thinking about it, writing it down, talking to people that you care about their opinion, modifying what you've done. What I'm going to share with you, I've been working on for about 20 years. And every time I have a new experience that's cathartic for me, I might change what I'm doing. I might change this every 6 months or so. So anyway, let's get started. My first belief, and this is obvious now after what I just said, is that living a life driven by a purpose leads to a more meaningful and rewarding life than simply meandering through life without a purpose. Don't raise any hands, but how many of you know what your purpose is in life? How many of you have thought about what your purpose is? How many of you have written it down? How many of you have talked to people you care about what your purpose is in life? Now, if you haven't done that yet, fast forward for me. Let's say you're in your hospital bed and you're near death, and somebody you love comes in and says to you, did you accomplish what you set out to accomplish in life? What would be your answer? No, I really never thought about what my goal was in life. Well, I had a goal, but I got to tell you, my calendar was so busy. I always had people wanting to meet with me. I didn't have time to focus on the goal. You know, how many of us are controlled by our calendar rather than our purpose controls our calendar, where we set time aside for the things that we care about? Now, these three pictures are actually the same person, believe it or not. This is me. On the far left is when I was a child. I was a Boy Scout. I don't know if any of you have ever been in scouting, but the Boy Scout motto is to help other people at all times. That was important to me. That inspired me. That's why I wanted to be a Boy Scout. And then when I was young, as Deborah said, I wanted to lead kind of a different life. I wanted to go to the U.S. Military Academy because I thought that I could help free the world, free the people who may not have been free at that time, and that the Army, the military, was one way to do that. So again, it was about improving lives. And then when I got out of the Army in 1980 and I joined Procter & Gamble, I was looking for a company where I could work every day to help other people to improve lives. And it just so happened that Procter & Gamble's statement of purpose is to improve the lives of the world's consumers with the products and services that we sell. So this is why I joined the company. I joined the company for two reasons. One was the purpose, the values, and the other was the people that I met. So this purpose of improving the lives of the world's consumers is what inspires me. It's why I joined the company, and it's also a big part of what my purpose is in life. I think my purpose in life is to help other people and to improve lives. So the purpose of the company obviously was something I selected, and the company selected me, and boy, I'm glad they did, because if I was applying today, I'm not sure I'd get a job. We also have 5 values, and these values are very important to our company. The first is leadership, and as I said, leadership is the scarcest resource, and I know here at MIT and in the Leadership Center you talk about distributed leadership. That's what we mean here. What we mean is leadership, not necessarily a person's title or position. We expect every employee to lead, and the leadership shifts depending upon the situation, depending upon what the issue is. We often talk about Procter & Gamble being a democracy of ideas. Whoever has the best idea is the one who leads. Ownership. Every Procter & Gamble employee owns stock in the company. Over 10% of our company stock is owned by employees. That's one of the highest percentage, employees and retirees, and that's one of the highest percentages of any Fortune 50 company. Integrity. We don't lie, cheat, steal. We don't tolerate people who do. Trust. We trust each other unconditionally, and that trust is oftentimes the glue that allows our organization to work efficiently. And passion for winning. We love to win externally. Internally, we collaborate. That's part of what distributed leadership is about. Externally, we fight like hell to win. So those are our values. That purpose and those values have affected who I am, and that's why my first belief is about having a purpose in life. And if you don't yet have one, I suggest you think about it. Another part of our values is sustainability, and Deborah talked about sustainability. Obviously, if you're a company like the Procter & Gamble Company and you've been around 171 years, which we have, we care about the world. We care about the earth. We care about the people in it. You can't improve lives while you're simultaneously destroying the environment in which you work. So obviously, we have a very strong sustainability strategy. It's available on our website. We just recently renewed it, and these are some of the things that are part of that strategy. So that's belief number 1 about leading a purpose, leading a life with a purpose. Belief number 2 is very simple. Everybody wants to succeed, and success is contagious. Now, think back for me this morning to when you got out of bed here in Cambridge or wherever you live. How many of you, when you rolled out of bed and your feet touched the floor, you said, I'm going to go to MIT today, and I'm going to do my darndest to prove to those people that I want to fail? How many of you would like to fail today? Please raise your hand. How many of you have ever in your life tried to fail? Oh, come on. There's got to be at least one person who tries to fail. No, I want you to capture that thought for me. Capture that thought, lock it in your brain, lock it in your heart, and never forget it. I've never met anybody in the world, in any country of the world, who tries to fail. Never have. Nobody tries to fail. Now, all of you have had leadership experiences in your life. How many of you are parents? Any of you parents? Some of you are parents. As parents, do we spend our time catching our children succeeding? Or do we only talk to our children when they do something wrong? As leaders, do we catch the people who work for us when they succeed, or do we only speak to them when they fail? Now, don't be hard on yourself. Leadership is time inefficient. If you expect to be a great leader and a great parent and to save a lot of time, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Leadership, parenting is time inefficient. And what you have to do is force yourself to not manage by exception. We typically all manage by exception. If something's going right, we let it go, and we spend our time working on the things that are going wrong. At P&G, we have scorecards, or checklists, you may want to call them, and we tend to color them. Red, yellow, green. Green's going right, yellow's, in between, red's going wrong. And oftentimes our leaders will spend a lot of time on turning the red into yellow. But the reality is, if you want to grow a business, the easiest way to do it is to take what's going right, take the strategies you already have, what's green, and drive it even further. So try to capture for me the fact in your heart and in your mind, nobody wants to fail, and try to spend your time catching people and your children succeeding. Now, have you ever noticed success is contagious? I grew up in Chicago. In fact, I know most of you probably are Boston Red Sox fans. You've had lots of success over the years. Some of you may be Yankee fans, but I know you wouldn't want to claim that in this room. But I grew up as a Chicago Cubs fan, and I was relieved when I moved to Cincinnati and I could root for the Cincinnati Reds, because as you know, the Chicago Cubs historically never win. They're the one exception to the rule. The rule is this, I once spoke at an event where the group of people were asked to wear sporting good clothing of the team they support. And I looked around the room and it dawned on me, everybody was wearing the clothing of a winning team. Nobody wears the clothing of a losing team. If the Cincinnati Bengals are winning, I'm from Cincinnati, if Cincinnati Bengals are winning, people buy the jerseys and the caps. They want to be known as part of a winner. If the Bengals are losing, their sales drop. When Beckham left Manchester United, the largest selling jersey for Nike was a Beckham jersey from Manchester United. He left, Nike wanted to renegotiate their contract because they knew their sales were going to go down. Now, as I said, the only exception to that are the Chicago Cubs. Chicago Cubs fans wear the stuff even when they're losing. And I don't know why. Maybe they're all masochists. But success is contagious, and people want to succeed. So people want to be members of a winning team. As a leader, create that winning team and have those people join your team. Number 3, putting people in the right jobs is the most important trait of a leader. Now, any of you read Good to Great or Built to Last by Jim Collins and Jerry Porras? Great books. Jim Collins talks about the fact that as a leader, you got to get the right people on the bus, and you got to get them in the right seats on the bus. And I personally really believe in that. I know quite a few people in business, and the number one thing I've heard from any CEO, any business leader, is the thing they regret the most is it took them too long to get the right people on the bus, took them too long to get the right seats, get them in the right seats on the bus. So if you remember one thing, when you take over an organization, it's that. It's identify the right people, get them in the right bus, get them on the right seats in the bus. Now, you may say to me, how do you do that? So let's do a small test. Think back for me. Most of you, I guess, are here enrolled in MIT. Think back for me to the course that you got the best grade in. The course you got the best grade in. Everybody got it? Lock it in your head. Okay, now think for me of the course you enjoyed the most. How many of you got the best grade in the course you enjoyed the most? That's good news. You're all human beings. Human beings, all of us, like to do things we're good at, and we don't like to do things we're not good at. So how do you know if you've got the people on the right bus or in the right seats on the bus? Are those people happy? Are they doing something that they like doing? We have 138,000 people at Procter & Gamble. All of them do not like calculus. So imagine we say, okay, imagine a company where you take 138,000 people, you find out what they're not good at, and then you put them in a job where they have to do what they're not good at. You're going to have a lot of unhappy people and probably a not very successful company. Contrast that with identifying what people are really great at. what they're great at, what they enjoy doing, and put them in a job that takes advantage of that skill. Get them on the bus, get them in the right seats on the bus. Number 4, character is the most important trait of a leader. Now, I define character a little bit differently. This comes from my West Point military experience, where I define character as putting the needs of the organization above your own needs. In the Army, when I had a troop unit, I would always eat last. Everybody would go through the chow line before I ate. It wasn't that we were going to run out of food. That wasn't the point. The point was to demonstrate to the soldiers that their life, their needs, were more important than my own. And so the officer would always eat last. That's about character. That's about putting needs in front of their needs in front of your own. Now, if you're going into battle as a soldier, what kind of officer would you rather work for? One who's going to put their needs above their own needs, your needs above their own needs, or one who does the reverse? Now, Collins also wrote about this in Built to Last. He talked about level 5 leadership. He wrote that level 5 leaders are leaders whose ambition is for the organization rather than themselves. And I certainly have found that to be true in business. If you're a leader whose ambition is for the organization, people will follow you. If you're a leader who is less authentic, whose ambition is all for themselves, people will figure that out and they won't want to follow you. So character is an important trait of leadership. Another part of character is responsibility, and I think this is a very important aspect of character. Responsibility is about taking responsibility for things even when they're beyond your control. My first day at West Point, I learned as a freshman, as a plebe, which is, I learned at the time was the lowest form of life on earth. I was trained to understand that to any question I only have 4 answers. So imagine my shoes are shined, my trousers are pressed, I'm going out to formation, and Deborah steps in a mud puddle and splashes mud and water all over my trousers and shoes. And Michael comes up to me, because he's an upperclassman, and he says to me, "McDonald, you toolbox." I got called that a lot. You know, what happened to your trousers? What happened to your shoes? Didn't you shine them? Didn't you press your trousers? I roll through my answers. 4 answers. Yes, sir. Well, that's not much of an answer. It's already happened. No, sir. Well, if I said no, sir, he would throw me out on an honor violation, because obviously something was wrong. Sir, I do not understand. That was the 3rd one. I did that one. You got it. I did that one. I said, "Sir, I do not understand." I did that for the first few weeks. I'm a slow learner. I didn't get it. I said, "Sir, I do not understand." They sent me to the hospital for an audiology test. You know the thing where you press the button? You know, this guy must be hard of hearing. How did he ever pass the physical to get in here? It finally dawned on me, the 4th answer. The 4th answer is, no excuse, sir. That's the 4th answer, no excuse, sir. And what I learned is what a powerful statement that is, to say no excuse, even when something may be beyond your control. Now think about it. If you're in a company, working for a company, and something goes wrong, who do you want to work for? Do you want to work for the leader that says, "Gee, I didn't know that was wrong. I should have checked Mike's work before we sent it up to the senior boss"? Or do you want to work for somebody who says, "That's wrong, no excuse, won't happen again," and they take responsibility? Taking responsibility is something that's not terribly popular in our society today, but I think it's an important part of character, an important part of leadership. So I would urge you to take responsibility. It all comes down to this famous phrase from the West Point Cadet Prayer, which has stuck with me throughout my life, and it's one of the things I think that differentiates Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble's been around, as I said, 171 years, because we've always tried to do the right thing. And if you want to be around a long time, if you want to sustain the institution, if you want to improve the lives of people, it's about doing the right thing. You know, you might have to take a hit in a quarter, but you want to do the right thing for the long term. Well, West Point Cadet Prayer says, "Help me to choose the harder right rather than easy or wrong." Have you ever noticed that the wrong thing is always easier to do? Or said another way, if you're doing something and it feels easy, get skeptical. Get real skeptical that you might be doing the wrong thing. Because certainly you have to do the hard thing in order to survive and sustain yourself. Number 5, diverse groups of people are more innovative than homogeneous groups of people. We believe in Procter & Gamble that we need to have an employee base that looks like the consumers we serve. If they're left-handed consumers, we need to have left-handed employees. If they're female consumers, we need to have female employees. Male consumers, male employees. And the reason for that's obvious. If you're in the consumer goods business and you want to be empathetic with the person you're trying to serve, you're trying to develop new products, new ideas to serve those people, you want to have people who think and act like they do. Also, we found that the more diverse a group is, the more innovation gets created. There's a wonderful book by a fellow named James Burke. I don't know if anybody's read it. It's called Connections. He also produced a TV show. And he follows inventions throughout the history of time. And one of the things he shows is that no invention ever gets used for what it was designed for. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone to help hearing impaired people hear. Marconi invented the radio so ships could communicate at sea. He never expected it to go on land. And the most famous of all is Thomas Watson, the founder of IBM, who invented the computer and made that famous quote that one day the United States may need 2 or 3 computers. Now, do you remember that? You know why Thomas Watson invented the computer? He invented the computer because it was used to take the census of the country. And people would go door to door with things called Hollerith cards, which all of you who study computer science know nothing about. But if you studied computer science when I did, this is what we used. Hollerith cards, and they would mark the card would go through a card reader, and the computer would tabulate the cards, and that's how they got the census of the country. So Watson said, someday, the United States may need 2 or 3 computers. Obviously, he was wrong, but he didn't expect the computer to become a microprocessor or to go inside a home. So what we want to do as an organization is we want to create as much diversity as we can in our organization to have these nodes on which these connections can be made. And those nodes are the diversity of your own experience and your own background. So that's why diversity is so critically important to us. Number 6, this one came from my experience working with Dr. Edwards Deming. Anybody here know Dr. Deming? Heard of Dr. Deming? Sure, I hope at MIT you would have. The father of total quality. We were lucky. We took Dr. Deming's total quality course at Procter & Gamble in the early 1980s. Dr. Deming was about 85 years old or so. And the point I learned from that course is, as a leader, before I blame the people in the organization for what goes wrong, look at whether or not I'm providing the right leadership, whether I'm providing the right strategies, whether I'm providing the right systems for those people to work within, whether I'm providing the right culture for those people to work in, before I blame the people for what goes wrong. Now, what was the event that came from? Well, that came from something called the white and red bead exercise. Anybody here done it before, the white and red bead exercise? Dr. Deming has a vat of beads, little plastic beads. Some are white, some are red. He also talks about this in his book, not Out of Control, something, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, you have this vat of beads, and you have this plastic paddle. And in this plastic paddle, which looks a little bit like a ping pong paddle, Dr. Deming had drilled holes. You put the paddle in the beads, you shake it around, you bring it out, you count the number of red beads, and you count the number of white beads. Dr. Deming writes them down. Of course, he was a statistician, so you're figuring this is about statistics. So you have 5 red beads, you might have 5 white beads, whatever. You do it again, maybe it's 6 and 7 or something like that. And obviously you're thinking, okay, he's going to teach me about means, upper control limits, lower control limits, all the good stuff we engineers learn. Well, that wasn't it. As I was doing all this, he was screaming at me, McDonald, more red beads. I told you I wanted all red beads. I want no white beads. Get all red beads. I'd go down, pull it out. He'd be screaming. The arteries were popping out of his neck, veins popping out of his head. He's screaming at me. I was worried we're going to have to call 911 because Dr. Deming was relatively old at the time. And when I finished, I was apologetic. I said, I'm sorry, I just couldn't get all red beads. Every time I tried, I would get some white beads. We looked at the means, the upper control limits, all that. he said, well, I didn't tell you this, but the beads are different diameters. The red beads are different diameters from the white beads, and the holes in the paddle are drilled the diameter of the number of beads I wanted you to get. Great metaphor. The metaphor is we tell people to do a job, we then scream at them, inspire them, do all the things we try to do to get them to do the job, and the task may be impossible because the red beads are different diameters than the white beads, and the holes on the paddle are all drilled a certain diameter, so they can't possibly get the job done. So before we blame the people in the organization for what goes wrong, let's make sure we've given them the right strategies, the right systems, the right leadership, and the right culture. This is the way we think of a high-performance organization at Procter & Gamble. You know, the organization has the purpose, values, and principles at the bottom. We have technical competence as the next level. You know, things like if you're in advertising, can you make effective advertising? Obviously an important skill. Then these 4 pillars, and all of that leads to a high-performance organization. And we as the leaders have to make sure we put our people in environments in which they can succeed. Number 7, now having said that and having given people the benefit of the doubt, there are going to be some people who won't make it on the journey. And our challenge as leaders is to have such a good relationship with those people and to give them such continuous feedback that the people themselves understand they're not going to make it on the journey before we as the leader have to tell them. You know, my goal with any employee at Procter & Gamble who may not make it within the company, where it may not be a good fit, is to have them recognize it based on my feedback, my continuous feedback, before it happens. Remember, I told you leadership is time inefficient. If you wait to give people feedback at the moment that you need to have a personnel discussion with them, it's too late. You know, you need to know those people, you need to be with those people, you need to be giving them constant feedback day to day so that you create a relationship and you can have an open and honest relationship with them. So there'll be some people who won't make it. Number 8, organizations have to renew themselves. I think of organizations like I think of plants, of biology. You know, the world is very different today than it was when I joined the company. You know, Charles Darwin, everybody talks about Charles Darwin saying survival of the fittest. He did say that, but you know what he really said? He said that the species that adapts the quickest will survive. It's not just about being strong, it's about being adaptable. Organizations have to adapt. I know they do. I mean, look at what's happened to the financial institutions today. Look what's happened to consulting firms today. You know, people have to adapt, institutions have to adapt, and we as leaders have to lead the change. We have to lead the change. So what we're looking for at P&G is leaders who create change, leaders who lead change, not just leaders who react to change happening to them. And importantly, the leader has to get the organization ready for the change. If you look at the Fortune 50 from 1955, Fortune 50, 1955, only 9 companies on that list are still on the list today. We're one of them. 6 of them are oil companies. That's 7. Boeing is 8. General Electric is 9. Those are the 9 companies that still exist today on that list from 1955. The half-life of companies is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Why? Because companies need to develop new capabilities, and sometimes they're slow to develop them. How about Kodak, film, digital photography? How about AT&T, wired phones, cell phones? You know, what is the thing that's going to cause the Procter & Gamble company to become irrelevant? I talk a lot about the boiled frog. I'm sure all of you have heard of Peter Senge. Peter Senge was a professor here at MIT, wrote one of the best business books ever written called The Fifth Discipline. In that book, on about page 23, 24, he talks about the parable of the boiled frog. Everybody know the parable? Do you all get that here? Okay, sorry if you don't. Okay, take a frog. Frog is cold. First of all, let me start with, I like frogs. I have nothing against frogs, okay? This is Peter's parable, not mine. A frog is cold-blooded. You take a frog, you throw it in a pan of boiling water. The frog has a huge temperature gradient from its body temperature to the boiling water. It immediately jumps out, okay? You take that same frog, put it in a pan of ambient temperature water, ambient temperature, have it on the range, turn the temperature up slowly. The frog never notices a large temperature gradient. The water boils and the frog boils. Peter's point of the parable is that businesses are like boiled frogs. The world changes around them gradually. They don't notice the change. They keep doing what they're good at. Why? Because what we're good at is what got us to the party. So we keep doing what we're good at. We're unwilling to change. And if we don't change quickly enough, we become boiled frogs. So what I say to P&G people, and we've got some of them up here in the front, is what's going to make us a boiled frog? Let's figure it out. Let's adapt. Let's change. You know, another thing Collins talks about, and Rosabeth Cantor at that other school here in Cambridge that I won't talk about, Rosabeth talks about, you know, the values and principles stay the same, but you're willing to change everything else to grow. That's what a successful business has to do. Now, why do I say that? I joined the company in 1980. So the day I joined the company, we were a $10 billion company. I was coming from the Army. I had traveled all over the world. I wanted to find a company where I could live and work in the same city my whole life. I joined in 1980. I did not predict globalization. Only 25% of our business was outside the U.S. As Deborah said, I spent 14 years, roughly half of my career, living outside the U.S. That was not my plan. But I had to adapt. I had to change. We had no brands that did $1 billion in sales. Today we have 23. We had 61,000 employees. Today we have 138. Look at this. You're all good at math. You're all at MIT. What's the multiple on sales between 1980 and today? 8, right? What's the multiple on number of employees? 2. What does that mean of productivity if you measure productivity as sales per employee? 4 times. You are entering a more competitive workforce than the one I entered. Businesses can do a lot more with a lot fewer people. What's created that? Globalization. Look at the billion-dollar brands. We have brands now. We have one brand, Pampers, which is $8 billion in global sales. We have brands like Pantene, $4 billion in global sales. You know, they're much more efficient. So a lot more can be done with a lot fewer people. That's bad news for all of us, for my children, for your children, and so forth. But look what happens if you do it right. If you do it right, if you increase sales, if you grow the business, if you improve productivity, look at the stock price. What's the multiple there? Roughly 25 or so. You know, so you get rewarded for the productivity improvement. So what's the secret? I'm going to tell you a secret. What's the single thing that differentiates those who succeed at Procter & Gamble, and I'll venture to say in business, versus those who don't? The single thing. It's the ability to learn. Why? Because you can't predict the future. If you can predict the future, I would like to meet you. I have some questions to ask you. But you can't predict the future. What you have to do is you have to be willing to learn. And as you get older, it gets harder and harder to learn new things, believe it or not. I get our general managers together, and I get a bunch of our new employees, right? General managers have maybe 20 years with the company, and I have the new employees tell them about everything they hate that the general managers do. I have them tell them about Facebook, and I say to the general managers, I say, you know, have any of you on Facebook? Very few of them are. I said, well, that's interesting because I am, and I friended all your children. And you should see the clothes your children are wearing on Facebook. You should see the beer bottles your children are holding on Facebook. Suddenly they all go home and they start getting on Facebook and seeing who they can friend. But the point is, you got to force yourself to learn new things. And while you all can laugh because you all know Facebook, I don't know what's going to be your Facebook. What's going to be your Google? What's going to be your new way of, what's going to be your globalization? There's going to be some change that's going to occur that you're going to have to force yourself to learn it, and it's going to be uncomfortable. Whoops. I won't belabor this one. Number 9, recruiting is a top priority. At Procter & Gamble, we only promote from within. Everybody starts at the entry level. I start at the entry level. There are a few exceptions. And so as a result, I'm out. I try to get out on college campuses, major business school campuses, at least once a quarter to meet people. Because every time I talk to somebody on a campus, it could be a future CEO of our company. So recruiting is obviously a top priority. Number 10, and this may be the most important one. As a leader, the true test of character isn't what happens in your organization when you're there, but it's what happens when you're not there. You know, at Procter & Gamble, when we evaluate general managers, we don't just look at their last year results. We look at their last 3 years of results, even if they've left the organization. Because what I'm looking for is footprints and fingerprints. I'm looking for, did that person build capability that withstood their leaving? Collins talks about this in Built to Last. He talks about, are you a leader that builds a clock, or are you a leader that tells time? We want leaders who build clocks. Because if everybody's building a clock, you can survive another 171 years. If you have people who are just telling time, your company may not survive. So it's all about building the capabilities so the organization can withstand you leaving. You know, we don't like heroic leaders in the sense of, well, Nadler wrote an article on charismatic leadership and the danger of charismatic leadership. Not that you shouldn't be charismatic, but you don't want to create an organization that depends entirely upon you, because then you won't have a capable organization. Now, those of you who are parents, because I remember there were some hands of parents, think about your children. In fact, think about when they become teenagers, you know, and you're going on vacation, and your children are staying at home. You know, would you be happy taking some money out of the bank, go in the ATM, take some money out of the bank, give it to them, say, we're going to see you in 2 weeks, take care of yourself, nobody looks in on them. What will you have when you get home? Will you have Tom Cruise in Risky Business? That's not bad. He got into Princeton, right, after that? I'm dating myself, for those of you who haven't seen the movie. Or, you know, or what would you have? Have you given your children the values and the belief in those values that's so strong that they won't change their behavior when you're not around? That's the question. So those are my 10 beliefs. And what I would suggest to you is, if you don't yet have a purpose in life, if you've not written down what your purpose in life is, please spend some time doing that. Then get in touch with your own experiences. There's a good book written by a guy named Noel Tichy, professor of strategy at Michigan, called The Leadership Engine. In that book, Noel talks about leadership as storytelling, and in the back of the book is a workbook that helps you get in touch with the stories that animate your life, and then how you turn those stories into beliefs, and how those beliefs help feed your purpose, and how the people you work with, your family members, want to know your purpose, want to know your beliefs, so that they can help you achieve it. Any questions or comments? That completes my prepared remarks. Any questions or comments over anything that I've covered? Questions, comments, reactions? Yes, sir. If you don't mind, start with your name. So I'm Bob, and that way we can get to know each other. Michael.
You and Mr. Lafferty both have military backgrounds, which inculcate you with very strong values, and you demographically grew up in that area. But one of your recruit things says, we promote from within.
Yes.
Clearly, the ability to draw from organizations like the military is going to decline for demographic and institutional reasons. Do you think that 5, 10, or 15 years hence, the way that P&G is diverse and is sustainable and is innovative is that it increasingly draws from the outside and doesn't just do internal development for its top talent?
It's a good question, Michael, and I'm glad you asked it, because while our policy has been promote from within, today 40% of Procter & Gamble people started their careers somewhere other than Procter & Gamble. Why do I say that? As most of you know, here in Boston, we just got a large slug of Gillette employees. We also acquired, in the early part of this decade, we acquired the Wella company, which is a German global company. And so we have a large number of Wella employees. So I think, while I think promotion from within is a good thing in terms of preserving the culture and growing the culture, I also think that getting people from the outside leads to greater diversity. And I can't be for diversity in all forms, but not against diversity in terms of company experience. As you correctly pointed out, I think the fact that AG spent time in the Navy and I spent time in the Army is because we grew up during the Vietnam War when there was a military conscription. It's a figment of demography more than any kind of linkage. If you want a diverse organization, you don't be homogeneous about anything. So we're looking for diversity. Thank you, Mike. That was a great question. Yes, sir. I'll get you a mic. Here, I'll tell you what. You can share.
Oh,
this is distributed leadership.
I'm Stephen Aller. So you talked about, on the one hand, focusing on what you're good at and making it better, but at the same time, you also mentioned how for renewal, you need to sometimes focus on something that you weren't good at because that'll lead on. I see those two as being
conflicting. Yeah, that's a great question. I oftentimes get that question also because there are times where to get to the next level, you have to develop a skill that you don't have. I want to approach those from different directions. As a leader of a company, I want to put people in jobs that they're great at. Okay, that's my prejudice. As an individual, I want to develop capability that I don't already have. So that's the way I separate the two. Now, certainly there are times where at Procter & Gamble, we'll take an individual and we'll say, you know, this person is the future leader of our global beauty business. We need to get them into the beauty care categories. We need to move them to China, where our beauty business is strong, and to other countries to get them those experiences. So we do that. But ideally, you know, across all 138,000 people, I want the majority of the people working against their strengths. I individually want to work against developing a capability I don't have. Whatever capability is required to survive this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world that we're in. Did that answer your question? Thank you, Steve. Yes, ma'am. Hi, Rebecca.
I have a question about the sustainability that Procter & Gamble is part of. Can you elaborate upon that?
Sure. Probably the best place to go to learn about a sustainability strategy is our internet site where it's laid out. But we have always had a strategy of sustainability. Obviously, if you've been in business as long as we have, 171 years, if you're trying to improve lives, you have to be concerned about the environment. So we've done things like constantly introduce new products to reduce the amount of packaging or waste that goes in the environment. Things like Tide with bleach, so you don't have to use a separate bleach. A 2-in-1 shampoo, a shampoo plus conditioner, so you don't have to use a conditioner. Our Pampers disposable diapers, we're always taking material out of the diaper. The diapers, when I joined the company, were this thick. Today they're like paper thick. So that's about products. It's about elimination of packaging, elimination of waste, elimination of effluent. We're always working on that. The other piece is in our operations. We've reduced our carbon footprint globally by about 40% in the last decade, and we're seeking to reduce it another 40% in the coming years. The way we do that is oftentimes the water that leaves our plant is cleaner than the water that comes into it. I can vouch for that because I've been to many of these plants. But also it's about finding ways to use energy in responsible ways, and it's about renewable sources of energy, whether it's wind turbines, cogeneration, or other things. We're building a plant in Utah right now, our paper making facility, which we hope to be the most state-of-the-art ecological plant ever. Now, having said that, our carbon footprint is relatively minimal. If you take all of our factories around the world, this is an $83 billion business. We have 145 factories around the world. The carbon footprint of those in aggregate is less than one power plant in Massachusetts. So already we're in pretty good shape. Having said that, it's something we have to stay after. And you know, if we do a lot on the Pure brand. Elizabeth, you want to talk about that? Why don't you talk about the Pure brand?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Klein. I graduated from Sloan in 2005, and I work on the Pure Water business. And on the Pure Water business, we have a partnership with the Children's Safe Drinking Water Initiative, where we give packets of the Pure product to Africa and to programs in Africa to make the water cleaner and to take out bacteria in the water that would make people sick. So that's one of the efforts we're involved in.
Michael, why don't you talk about what you've done on detergents?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Michael Klein. I'm married to Elizabeth, and I'm also a class of 2005 from Sloan. And
You can get more than a degree.
all in the family. So I work in our fabric care business, and there are a couple of initiatives in fabric care. One is more of an environmental sustainability, which is our Tide cold water product, which uses significantly less energy. You don't have to heat the water, for example, and we think that that's one of the huge benefits. It's very, very big in Europe, and actually it's very big in Canada as well. We're hoping it catches on more in the United States because we think people can save a lot of energy that way. And then on a social sustainability side, we have a Tide Loads of Hope program, which is a truck that we actually drive to disaster areas. It made extensive news during the hurricanes Katrina and Rita, where we would drive the truck down to Louisiana, and we would help people who are, I mean, one of the major problems is they're unable to just get access to sanitation facilities and even clean their clothes. And so we would drive this truck full of laundry washing machines down to help people get clean clothes to improve the sanitation in those areas.
Thank you, Mike. Charlotte, why don't you talk about Pampers?
So, Charlotte Lanier, Sloan 2005 also. On Pampers, we're all about caring for babies' development, but in order to care for babies, they have to live. So we have a partnership with UNICEF where our goal is by 2013, we will eliminate neonatal tetanus. So in many developing countries, babies are dying every day from tetanus, something you never hear of here. So again, if we want to care for babies, they must live. So we have a campaign that's actually going on right now. 1 pack equals 1 vaccine. So for every bag or box you purchase, we donate the cost of a vaccine for to eliminate neonatal tetanus. So if you are doing any baby showers, registries, whatever it may be, please go ahead and get that pack of Pampers so we can eliminate neonatal tetanus together.
Thank you, Charlotte. Well, I think at the current rate of sales of Pampers and the work we're doing with UNICEF, we're expecting to eliminate neonatal tetanus by 2013 or 2014. And then we want to go on to another disease. Elizabeth talked about PURE. 4,000 children die a day from dysentery and diarrhea, and it's because they have unclean water. So, we really have to get after this one. I think water is going to be the scarcest resource all of us have in the future. We really, really, really have to get after this one, and we have to find ways, and we think we have with our PURE technology, of making dirty water clean so people can drink it. Unfortunately, in many of the areas I go, many of the developing markets I'm in, people look at the water and they think if it's clear that it's potable, and of course that's not true. It's the bacteria, the viruses that are in that water that actually create the disease and kill people. These are things we take very seriously. If your mission, if your purpose in life is to improve lives, you want your brands to sell a lot of product, but you want them also to have a positive role in the lives of people. Another example that Vivian has worked on is our Always brand, which is a feminine hygiene product. We have unfortunately, there are many cultures in the world, and no culture is wrong. I don't want you to think any culture is wrong, but there are many cultures in the world where when women menstruate, they're thought to be unclean. So in many cultures in the world, women who are menstruating can't go into the temple or can't go to school. And in sub-Saharan Africa, this is a huge problem. Imagine if you're a child and 1 week a month you're not allowed to go to school. So we go in with our products, we train the government, we train the community about menstruation's a good thing. We use our products to help deal with the menstruation, and we keep girls in school, and then those girls graduate. And those are the kinds of things we like to do with our brands because it feeds that purpose of improving lives. Any other? I think I have time for one more question or comment. I see one in the back. I see one. All of us, we're going to stay here for a while, too, if you have any questions or comments afterwards.
Hello, I'm Greg.
Hi, Greg.
So you have 12 principles, life principles here that you've kind of outlined. I'm curious, I know for me personally, it's very tough to remember and internalize them on a daily basis. I'm curious what you've learned over the over your time to, do you look at them every day? Do you post them? How do you internalize these things and make sure that it's right there when you need it?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's not there right when you need it, which is most important.
That's a great question, Greg. I'm a big believer in Stephen Covey. I took some training from him back in the 80s. And one of the things he talks about is when you have to teach something, that's when you really learn it. So just the mere fact, and I thank you all for the opportunity to talk to you today about these beliefs, because just by talking to you about them, I'm learning it and I'm inculcating it. So I think also writing it down is incredibly important. I know a lot of you will probably say, yes, I have a purpose in life. I don't need to write it down. But force yourself to write it down, and you'll be surprised how hard it is. And then also share it with the people around you. Everyone in the organization that I work with at P&G knows what my beliefs are. And they help keep me honest. If they see me doing something that they think may be contrary to a given belief, they can call me on it. And I find that very helpful. And then, of course, last but not least is the process of renewing it. Just like we talked about renewing organizations, renewing your beliefs, I think is incredibly important too. All of those things work in concert to help you keep them front and center, I think. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed being with you this afternoon. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much. Thank you.